You are listening to Fika with Vicky on United Public Radio, 107.7 and 105.3 from New Orleans.
Hello everyone and welcome to Fika. Our guest today is Halo Quin. Halo is an author, storyteller, practicing witch, and doctor of philosophy. We'll explore all those aspects of her life in a bit, but first I want to share that quote which encouraged me to invite her to Fika. I hadn't ventured far into her folktales, fairies, and spirits when I read this in a passage encouraging the reader to write their thoughts in her book beside the thoughts she had offered. And that reader's possible reluctance to do so, because we all know there's that thing that you don't mar a book in any way. But I write in books, so I may be biased, but moving on from Halo. And maybe, if I may be a little provocative in my framing, contemplate why it is that what I've written in this book might hold more weight with you than your own thoughts. And bam, there it was, Halo. Straight to the point, polite, encouraging independent thought and self-understanding. And I knew in that moment, Halo Quin was someone I wanted to have a conversation with. Welcome to Fika, Halo.
Thank you very much.
So how are you today?
I'm good. We had storms yesterday and then sunshine today, so I got out and had a walk along the seafront. I live on the west coast of Wales, so I'm very lucky to see the waves every day.
And I'm very jealous. I get out to the water whenever possible. So there's my notes are askew today because there are so many different things. And so first of all, I'm going to ask you to tell us a little bit about what makes a Halo Quin. Where did your interest in all this begin?
Oh gosh, I don't remember a time when I wasn't interested, when I wasn't exploring. There are stories from before I can remember of me when I was little tiny Halo, going looking for fairies and like burrowing into hedges looking for the spirits. And I remember knowing they were there. I could feel they were there. And I knew that I needed to be close to them. Mm-hmm. And that came with me all the way through. And then when I was about 10, one of my friends was messing around with Ouija boards and got very freaked out and told me she was getting scared about things. And so I went to the library because books are where the magic is.
And where you can find the answer. Information is power. And
exactly.
Once something that's scary becomes controllable, you're in a better spot.
Yeah. And or at least once you can build a relationship with it, once you can find a starting point for wrapping words around what you're feeling and what is beyond what everyone says is real, and that those stepping points, those moments where you find those liminal spaces and you find those doorways and those cracks to kind of go, oh, hang on a minute, there's something more, there's something just beyond this. It opened up this whole world that I'd always known was there and always been connected to, but I'd started to think, well, maybe I'm wrong.
Maybe it's just me.
Yeah, because at that age you start to sort of pay attention more to what the adults are saying in the rest of the world, and everyone else thinks it's silly. Or many people around me thought it was expressed that. So yeah, finding those points where other people were sharing, these are experiences I've had, opened those doorways and stopped me from losing that feeling, that connection, that enchantment.
And it also helps that by reading that, you learn some of the terminology, some of the words for expressing your feelings that you hadn't had before because you had no one to, express them with you. So Yeah, it's a very now. I wanted to ask you. I mean, I read about it, but for the listeners, when you say spirits, most people in think ghosts, but that's not your meaning for spirits. So, do you want to enlighten us a little bit about that?
Sure. So I use the term spirits as a very broad term. So to kind of encompass any being of spirit that doesn't have a body. So that would include the beings that we call fairies or the fair folk, which is a huge category in and of itself. But would also include deities, gods and goddesses, and other bright, shiny things, ancestors, um, spirits that are angels, for example. So any being that is of the spirit realm and doesn't have a physical body, I kind of put under that bracket. And generally speaking, if I say my spirits, I mean the ones that I work with and that are amenable to working with human beings and interacting with us in positive ways.
So they're part of your world, and they become yours then. Okay, so that was the little Halo. Then Halo grew up and she wrote, we'll start off with this Crimson Craft, a sexual magic for the solo witch. Now, for those listening, we are going to keep this totally PG and you're all going to be comfortable. So that's okay. Stay where you are. All right. You don't have to run away from us. We're not dangerous. Wow. Okay. Anyway. In your bio, it says that you are a sensual witch exploring the divine, erotic, and sacred pleasure and beauty. So, can you explain a little bit about what sent you down that pathway and what inspired the book? I guess it's the same kind of thing.
So, Crimson Craft is actually my most recent book out of 8. So, there's quite a long journey of writing and working and practice to get to this point where I felt that I could share these things. But it kind of started, the reason for writing it started at that childhood place where when I hit my teens, as many of us do, I found the world a difficult place to be in. And so I retreated into fantasy realms, into fantasy stories, into imaginary places, and kind of slowly or very quickly retreated from being in my body. And this really came to a head when I hit my late teens and I was having problems with my back. So I had a lot of pain. And then when I was 20, it all like went, and I wasn't able to walk properly for 6 months. I was in a lot of pain for quite a long time. So I was very much kind of avoiding being in my body. And I realized at a certain point, well, to be entirely honest, every time I ask the spirits and the deities that I work with, is like, how do I heal? How do I, like, I'm in pain, how do I heal? What should I be doing? The answer I'd get back would be dance, dance, dance. And I'm like, okay, so to do that, I need to be in my body. So I started trying to work on those processes to be embodied. And the more embodied I became, the more I got out of my head and actually back in touch with the sensual being that I am as a human being, the stronger and clearer my magical practice became. The stronger and clearer my connection to spirit and to the divine became. And those pieces kind of unfolded together, and I came to that understanding, and I started then looking into things related to magic around the body and healing in those contexts. And that led me into looking at things like tantra, both classical and neo-tantra, and sacred sexuality, because our bodies, that is a capacity that we have for sensual pleasure. And that, yeah.
To ground in your body, you were using your body to ground in, to come back to this world.
Yeah. And that moment of coming, the points at which I could come back into my body, and I did a lot of work on that. So it wasn't something that came easy to me as a general thing. So I developed lots of techniques and learned lots of things from books, from people, from workshops, from classes, and from the spirits, in that, like, how do I be in my body, and what does it mean to be spirit, a spirit that is also a body?
Well, and this is a big subject, like just this alone, which is a small part of the book, people, but it's a huge subject. That this is something that many people do in their teens because they're not comfortable with the attention that they're getting in this way.
Mm-hmm.
And the thoughts that are being sent to them, and particularly if they're very sensitive. So this is not something that is just about you. It can go out there to anybody. And then also, I was thinking, as people get older, they are like not ready to be out there because they're getting older, and we're told by society that's a horrible thing too. So it can happen as bookends at both ends of your life, and it needs to be addressed. I mean, I'm going to quote you again. Oh,
go on then.
It sums everything up. Our bodies hurt, and we often don't know how to heal them, so we retreat further from them, and that's what you were discussing there.
Yeah, and I think that this is something we are encouraged by the world that we live in. We are encouraged to disconnect from our bodies because there are various things that are asked of us in terms of work since the Industrial Revolution, if not before. We are encouraged to basically be cogs in the machine. We're producers, and so we're treated as though we are machines. So we are encouraged to disconnect from our bodies so that we can go through the motions and not really truly feel what we actually deeply desire, what actually feels good to us and what is natural to us. So there's that layer of, like, it's easier for us to be controlled and to be within a working environment. And also we have that thing of the pains of the world. We're not taught how to manage that. We're not taught how to heal, how to integrate, how to soothe ourselves, how to deal with stress in a very stressful world. So it's not only easier, but we're also encouraged to separate out because it weakens us as whole beings, the whole beings that we are.
So, first of all, I want to just express my love for Halo again. She's singing my song up from the Industrial Revolution. And two, I think this has been an even greater thing for younger generations because there is so much information coming our way. And that information can be good, it can be great. I wouldn't have found out about you. We wouldn't be able to talk right now if it wasn't for all that information coming towards us. But we've never learned how to deal with it. Something happens on the other side of the world, and within minutes, we have to feel about it. So I think it is harder for younger people now to know how to do that because their parents don't even know how to help them.
No, well, why would they? The world is changing so rapidly, and as you say, we've got this information era, and we want to be compassionate, we want to be connected, we want to know what's happening because human beings are inherently caring creatures. We're social animals, so we want to feel that connection and to understand and to reach out to people that hurt. And we haven't evolved to hold the whole world. There are millions of people, billions of people on this planet. And our brains can hold about 150 people as a community. So we're trying to reach outside of ourselves. And where would we learn how to do this? It's that sort of thing of, I heard it described once that we haven't evolved to keep up with cars. So we're basically like cave people driving these super fast things. Like, no wonder we don't, like, no wonder accidents happen. No wonder it feels weird.
And people get angry. Like, they get cavemen angry about territory on the highway and all that, which I shouldn't say, because they kind of have a fondness for cave people. So
yeah. But like, that's those tools, like that feeling, that anger, that desire to connect, all of those things are really important, valuable human things. And we've just been thrown into a world that is changing so rapidly. And there are certain people, and we know exactly who they are, who are shaping that for their own profit. And that filters down then into the structures that we're put in. And so, to come back to it, we are kind of discouraged from being connected to our spiritual and embodied selves, so that we make more profit for those people.
Yeah, because the information is being used to tell us what to think and feel. And Halo, your next book needs to be on this subject. Okay, so there has to be a million books on how to deal with all of, because I mean, I grew up, with my parents. Well, they had television come in and going into the moon, but then I think about what the learning curve in my lifetime, and I mean, some people have just given up because they can't, but luckily I have younger people in my life and that to help me out when I cry, and things. But it's a lot of learning just to be able to keep up, but with the demands physically, but we've not had time to keep up mentally, as you say.
There are some wonderful resources now coming that are coming out, books in particular, in order to help us deal with the fact that we are embodied creatures with sensitive nervous systems who have not evolved for the world that we are now in. So things like Burnout by Emily and Amelia Nagoski, I think that's how you say their name. Like, that's a particularly good one for going, look, this is how we actually are, and this is how we deal with some of the stresses that we're in. So there are some wonderful resources now in and particularly within the realm of sort of somatics and engaging with that kind of bottom-up therapy, where you're looking at what the body needs and starting from there, rather than trying to sort of talk yourself into a better mindset and hoping that fixes things. You kind of go at it from both directions, because we include all of those pieces. And Crimson Craft then is my offering for the kind of magical, spiritual, pagan side of that.
And it's good. It's very, very good. Okay, that was Burnout by Natalie. What was the last
by
name?
Amelia. Emily, sorry, Amelia and Emily Nagoski. I'll have to find the spelling for you.
Yeah, you can always send it over to me. You know where I live, so on the computer. So yes, Crimson Craft does do that, and as I read. In between each section, each chapter, you ask people to check in with their ethics, which we should check in on a number of things all the time. We don't think about those things enough. How comfortable they are with moving on, etc., etc. So while I was doing some of the activities in the books, I call them the rituals and whatever, which moon books are fabulous for. Like, they're so much fun, just to even play with without realizing that you're learning a lot of different things. I realized I was having problems with the focus on me. Like, this book is about you people. Okay, so
it's about the reader. Yeah.
So it's like thinking about what I want, and what I desire, or even going into the glamour aspects. What do I like about myself, my physical appearance, because that gets into all that vanity, but we forget that also gets through confidence. So do you want to, I got to see all these wonderful things reading your book. Do you want to give them a bit, just a couple ideas of things they can do to build their confidence in that way, to get back in touch with them?
Sure. So to go back to how you started this with the reminder to check in with yourself, it's surprising what little things can sometimes bring up, because we are facing things that and looking at things that we've been discouraged from doing. So actually having confidence in yourself and having comfort in the way that you appear in the world is discouraged often, because it makes it easier to sell us things, basically, is the bottom line. So there's that. There are things that you can do, like, for example, finding it doesn't need to be something that other people can see. So you can do things that make you feel good, like choosing a brightly coloured or a colour of underwear that makes you happy, or odd socks, if you like wearing odd socks, that you're going to wear in your shoes that no one else are going to see, and you can know you've got those bright colours and those happy things that just make you smile whenever you think about it. And like starting from that point of going, okay, what is it that makes me smile, even if other people might think it's silly, and how can I invite that in a way that still makes me smile, but without necessarily having to worry about what other people are going to respond to. So that's sort of a starting point. One thing that I really like to do is I got some roll-on perfume, because my partner's asthmatic, so I can't use spray-on. So I got some roll-on perfume that was made by a local-ish South Walian lady. And she makes these specifically with herbs and oils and dedicated to specific energies. And so I found a couple that really spoke to me. And when I put them on, I'm not just putting on a scent. I put it on with a conscious decision to go, I am anointing my body as a sacred part of me. Like the body within my tradition, within my magical tradition, the body is another soul. So not a separate soul. Like we are made of multiple souls that operate together to make one whole soul, if that makes sense. Like our heart and our lungs
there's
operate
different
together
parts
to make
of
ourselves.
us. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and our body is one of those parts of spirit that make up our whole self. So I will anoint myself with the perfume. And for anyone else in the world, like, oh, I have a nice smell. But I know whenever I catch scent of it, if I put my hand near my face, I catch a scent of what's on my wrist. It reminds me that my body is sacred. And I've made that step. And once you start engaging with your physical self as sacred and going, okay, it is what it is. You don't have to like it you don't have to think of it in any particular like beautiful or whatever. But if you think of it as sacred and you go, okay, this is sacred. This is as much a part of spirit as my mind, as my soul, as my emotions, like all of these are part of spirit. Then you can begin to move through the world in a way that treats yourself as sacred and accepts that sort of that shift in attitude can help you to feel more okay with being however it is you are. And once you let go of needing to be a certain way and accept yourself as sacred, then your confidence naturally flows.
So
this comes from the principle of your body being a temple, and you are the divinity to which it is dedicated.
And it's as little as, we're taught you get a drink at noon because it's lunchtime then, and it's like highly irregular to ask to go use the fountain before then. But when you see your body as something sacred, it's thirsty, you give it a drink. Like it is important. And there's all those little things in our minds that we don't even realize we're trained there.
Yeah. Like when I was at school, I'd go the entire day without using the bathroom. because so I sort of trained my body to hold on, and actually that caused all sorts of problems later on because I wasn't listening to what my body actually needed and treating it as divine.
As you said, you removed yourself from your body because it was just too difficult to do all these things that were being asked of it that weren't natural. And and so sorry. Speaking of drinks,
and listening to your body.
um, and so that comes over to the idea, which is I think for a lot of people would be very strange, but to find yourself desirable, because we live in a world that we desire things, we desire other people, but to see ourselves as desirable is just not out there.
I mean, so underlying all of this is the principle that the whole of everything is divinity, is the universe experiencing itself, is the goddess made manifest, is the gods playing, is divine, is sacred. And if everything is divine and sacred, then you are divine and sacred. And when I talk about things being divine, generally the feeling I get from that is that everything is love. Underlying everything is this universal force of love, which is reaching for union. So if everything is love, manifest in various different ways and interacting, then you too are love, which means that you are also loved by the universe. So if you can start to see yourself and consider yourself, and it's a difficult topic, like you were saying, it's really difficult accepting yourself as desirable or as valuable. But if you can start to go, okay, well, what would it mean? Just ask the question, what would it mean if I was my own beloved, if I was love, if I was desirable? And if you ask those if questions and just let the sort of the space for that possibility be there, then the question comes up, well, then how can I treat myself? How would I treat someone that I love? How would I treat my beloved?
And
it's in the
yeah. that wasn't a question for me. It was a theoretical. Okay.
Oh no, I would love to hear your answer if you like. It was rhetorical.
Well, this is the thing. We look at ourselves and we see every flaw that anyone has ever told us. Every voice. I mean, that's why your questions are so important, because why is this in my head? Did I put it there or did somebody else? So when we look at ourselves as our beloved, we would not say that to someone we care about. We wouldn't say, "Oh, your nose is too big," or, I mean, some people do, but I wouldn't do that. Your nose is too big, or you need to wear more of this color. You just wouldn't do that. You would notice how their eyes sparkle when they laugh, and that tone of voice they have when they're telling a joke. Like, these are the things you see, those little crinkles. And so we need to do that for ourselves.
And it is really challenging to start from a place of wherever you're at and conjure up a feeling of love for yourself, or shift those thought patterns and the stories that we have, those tapes in our mind. It's really challenging to shift those. And so this is where I come to the principle of love as a verb, love as an action. So if everything, like if you want to show someone that you love them, then you act. They can't feel what you're feeling, so you loving them is an action. It is something you do for them. It is the way in which you look after them, or the gifts that you give them, or the words that you say to them. So if you can turn it around and go, okay, how do I act love towards myself? How can I perform love towards myself? It doesn't matter then whether or not you feel it when you do it. You teach yourself, and you start to teach your subconscious self and your deep self and your divine self that you are worthy of actions of love. And so when you start to do these things on a conscious basis, and that's what like a lot of the rituals and activities in the book are about, it's taking those steps to act out love towards yourself, to teach yourself, and to do that with consciousness and deliberation, mindfulness, if you like mindfully doing acts of love for yourself teaches yourself, retrains yourself that you are worthy of being loved. You are loved because you are giving that to yourself, and that shows you that you are loved.
And so it's not just, I mean, we talk a lot about, self-love and personal care and taking care of yourself, but I found that your book went a little further into it, like what kind of music makes me feel desirable. It's like on another level of, well, this is a love song and everybody likes it, but I might be a little bit different. There could be like that jazzy thing, or that 1940s black and white kind of thing where everybody had a witty comment and conversation makes you feel sexy. Like it's just that whole different side of us that we tend not to express unless we're given permission to do it in that situation, or we do feel that we're beautiful enough to do it, or looking like those pictures on the magazines and things. And this addresses that aspect, which is the power. I mean, there is a power in that drive, that confidence, that, I mean, the advertisers know it. Those in power know it. It's time that we knew it and we took it back for ourselves. And that can be done, people, by picking up the Crimson Craft by Halo Quin. Because we also have to, she said she had 8 other books. There is a lot. So are you happy with that conversation on Crimson Craft, Halo?
I am very happy with that. I think the only piece that I wanted to add is exactly what you're saying about that is that confidence, that being at home and comfortable in your own skin and knowing yourself as your own beloved. That is where the power of the witch, of the magic worker, of the healer, of the human being, that is where our power comes from. So taking responsibility over reclaiming that is in itself an act of power. And this is a lifelong process. In fact, you could say it's the work of many lives, because actually you start that process in yourself and it ripples out, and the people around you also feed into that and learn from that. So by taking that or making a declaration, and that in itself is a magical act, is a spell for more love in the world, more love for yourself, and for the confidence and personal power that you need in order to be in the world.
And so to put that and that confidence, so we'll take the old saying, dance like nobody's watching, and turn it into dance like they are watching and they like it.
Yeah,
you are controlling
exactly
the room.
I've turned it around, and I will say, dance like everyone's watching and you love it.
Yes, and you love that they're watching and that you're dancing. And because there is great power in that. So we all need to be more powerful. I'm sorry, that's not a bad word. Powerful in ourselves, so we can go do the things that we want to do. And
there's a really important concept that Starhawk talks about quite a bit, which is the difference between power over and power from within. And when I talk about power, I mean power from within, that personal responsibility and your power to be effective in your life. And that comes with obviously comes within community and within relationship.
It's not about a hierarchy. It's about your personal power to say, there was a time I wouldn't have had the nerve to say, hey, Halo, want to come over and do Fika? But you know what? I sit there and say, I'm going to do this, Vicky. And look what a great time we're having. So,
well, exactly. And in doing that, you recognize my power.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that you're somebody worth talking to, and that you've got something important to say.
So thank you. Thank you for standing in your power and for seeing mine.
We are such a wonderful example. You're welcome. Look at what we just did there.
See?
No, I'm being Leo bad now.
I was going to say, this is what happens when you get Leos in the room together. I love your sunny shininess. I love your sunny shininess. Let's brighten everything up.
Let's hold hands and dance through the middle. And
like everyone is watching.
It's like everyone is watching. So, one of the other books that I wanted to touch upon was Folktales, Fairies, and Spirits. And I found that I'm like a big, fairy fan. If they're listening, take note. But it's something that there's a lot of different opinions on, and I just get excited about everybody's different opinions that I can put in the mesh. And so today we're going to hear Halo's opinions. And so this is my way of saying I want no comments about, I don't believe that, because we can all believe whatever we want. I think that's been stated.
Yeah.
So one of the things, we talked about your idea of spirit, but I think what you made very clear was the connection, once again, that connection with yourself and the fairies also leads to a connection with the earth and nature and that whole part of our being that longs for that we've been separated from. Yeah. Shoot, go with that.
So one of the things for me, and this is the beautiful thing about the term fairy, is it is such a broad term, and it's a relatively modern one. It's only a few hundred years in use, and it's been applied to quite a broad spectrum of spirits. So you have everyone from what we would describe as the elves nowadays, and if you think of Tolkien's elves, you've got a relatively good image of what was pictured. Some of the details obviously a bit tricky, but so from there all the way through to will-o'-the-wisps that lead you into the undergrowth, into the swamp, and everything in between, the Jack of the Green in the forests, who watch over the trees. So there's all these different spirits that kind of come under the bracket of fairies. And being a philosopher, one of the things that I have always, and it's a sort of a natural state for me, one of the things that I've always tried to do is go, okay, well, what makes this category what it is? Why have we got this bracket and not others? What's the edges of this? And there's blurs at the end, there's edges, like the elves in the Norse mythology, and those I always say Scandinavian because I'm talking about that kind of area.
Well, I'm not correcting you, but if you feel better, Scandinavian. Okay, people.
Scandinavian. Yeah, Scandinavian is the correct word, but I stumble over it because I say Scandinavian because it's that. So I apologize. That's a colloquialism.
Oh no.
So that concept of the elves were both these particular types of spirits, and they were also the ancestors, specifically male ancestors. And if you look throughout folktales within Britain, within Europe, in many places, these spirits, if you end up in what we call a fairy mound, you will often find people describing, oh, that's so-and-so, I knew him, he died last year. Oh, that's such and such, she was my great-great-grandmother. And you find the ancestors living in the same place as these fairy spirits. So I sort of looked at this thing and went, okay, well, what is it that makes this category, and how is it that they overlap with us? And the understanding that I came to, both through sort of intellectual application and interacting with them as spirits, was that this was the best term that I had for the category of spirits who are very, very close to the physical world. They live in more or less in the same realm we do, in that we overlap from the physical, the emotional, mental, and an aspect of the spiritual. If you think of us of all of that as being energy at different frequencies, and they kind of overlap from the emotional, mental, spiritual, and like slightly different frequencies. So they're as close to the physical realm as any other spirit, like any other disembodied thing will get. And many of them find their bodies and express their bodies and their beings through the natural, what we call the natural realm. And I was looking at it and encountering them and feeling my way through it and engaging with them and talking to them, and I'm like, what is it that you're telling me? What is it that I'm seeing here? And what I saw was, and what I felt was, this point at which we are spirits in physical bodies, and our bodies are part of nature. We are natural beings, and we are very close kin to the people we call the fair folk, including the from the shining ones, the tall elven type ones, right the way through to the ones that are much less human. Like we're kin to them, we're family, we're cousins. And that doesn't mean we're going to get on with all of them. I know most people don't get on with all of their family. I certainly don't. So that's okay. But we're still family, we're related. And that's, you start interacting with them as other denizens of the world that we live in. And they lead you, you've got the ones that are closely related to the trees, closely related to the green realm. And so when you're interacting with those particular fairies, those particular spirits, then you're interacting with the realm of the plants at the closest point to humanity that we can get. And so that interaction, that building that relationship, helps to rebuild our relationship to the magic that runs through the physical world, which also runs through us as natural beings. So like that was a little bit of a ramble, but the short version really is that fairy. Hey, I'm glad. But summarize, fairy is a huge category that includes beings that are very much like us and beings that are the spirits of nature. And when we interact with other beings that are close to us and are connected to this planet and connected to this world, then we deepen our relationship with other beings of this world. And that in and of itself helps us to widen our understanding of what is divine, what is people, and what is worth treating with respect.
Which is all of it, because why I like fairies, from what I've learned, and why it's because it is about respect. It isn't that they're evil or they're good. It's just they don't have time to waste on people that make promises and don't fulfill them. You're nice to me, I'll be nice to you. I mean, it's a very equal kind of thing. So I'm like, okay, I can relate to that philosophy to a great degree, and I respect that. I definitely respect that. So in the book, spirit, I mean, you explain this and go into more detail, of course, in the different chapters. But in your book, what it does is allows us, through the activities, rituals, whatever, the questions, to come in touch with the fairies more. It encourages that relationship. Is that a way of putting it? It helps us build that relationship. So at the beginning of all the books, it sort of says how to use this book. So it explains to you, how to go about using this book. And I have now, for us in North America, many of us having come here with roots in Scandinavia or the UK or whatever, what is important that I get from this book, and which I'm still working on, and with many things that I have read lately, is the idea of those spirits that are in where we are now and respecting them as well. To go back into the lore of the native lore, and to really research that and see. And when you do, which is, yes, this is my way of saying I am on the lookout for some very cool storytellers, Aboriginal storytellers from around the world. So if you're a very cool Aboriginal storyteller, email me. It's around here somewhere. And I have some other in the pan, because we want to be respectful of them. And I know that there is the little people, which I've been out to Nova Scotia, and at the park they had a thing about the little people, and so I'm very much about the little people if you're out there. Okay, so well, if the little people are out there, and also people telling us about the little people.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that is it's bringing respect out, not only between humans and nature and the fairy realm, but also worldwide, right? If you're having, you need to respect those stories that you're sitting on top of.
So it's that one the kind of the function, that the purpose of Folktales, Fairies and Spirits of that book was to illustrate ways in which you can engage with the stories of the land that you are living on. So I provide more or less a story per chapter, and use that and break that down to show, okay, this is how I got this information from this story, to show the workings out so that people can do it for themselves. Because one of the things that I've come across a lot are books of stories and books talking about this is how you work with these beings, but not books that show, and not information that talks about, how do you work out where that information came from. So it's showing you the processes, so that when you find the stories of the land that you are on that talk about the spirits that were there before you got there, how is it that you can engage with them to find the information that you need to build those relationships? Because those stories they're talking about how those beings that live there in that place want to be interacted with, and how they are likely to respond to things, and which ones are good to talk to and which ones don't want to have anything to do with us, because some of them don't and some of them do.
And I get that. Sometimes I don't want anything to do with us either. But no, it is interesting, because taking that to the point, I started thinking, okay, so if in Britain they often make offerings of honey and milk, wouldn't that be, say, in Canada, wouldn't it make sense for that to be maple syrup? And then I found a children's book, because a lot of these things are hidden in children's books because of the powers that be, but where it was the water of life. And I'm like, oh my goodness, is the water of life? Yes, it is maple syrup. It is a big thing for the fairy realm here. And how the little people brought I don't want to say it, but the water of life, something like that. I have to look more into it. But they do, within the stories, give us a hint of how to react to those spirits. So yeah, there's a lot there for getting in touch with.
And it's interesting as well, because so RJ Stewart talks particularly about how some fairy spirits will travel with a family, and so some won't, but some will have traveled with a family. So if you've got people who have emigrated to somewhere, they will have brought some spirits with them. And North America, Canada is a really interesting example of this, because it's only very recently that Europeans really went and took their spirits over. So you're going to have a mix of spirits that are attached to families and spirits that are attached to the land. And it is really important to, if you're engaging with these things, to engage respectfully in terms of the cultures from which those stories come. Because if you look at if you look at interpretations that have been written, say if I went over to the States and gathered some stories and wrote them up and shared them with people, there's no guarantee that I'd get it right. And I could share stories about beings that actually shouldn't be shared without realizing. So it's kind of, as you say, it's really important to get the native, the Aboriginal storytellers, and to listen to them. And if they don't want to share, then they don't want to share. At which point you can use stories, the stories you do have access to, for hints as to starting places. And then you approach, and there's that key word again, with respect, and go, okay, well, this is the starting point I have. These spirits they seem like they want to work with me. How do I gently build that relationship? And just very, very slowly listen and respond.
Yes, no, I think it's definitely like any relationship you want to build. Listen,
Yeah.
listen before you speak. Listen before you tell. I mean, this is what it's all about. And you don't have to tell the world I'm working with the spirit or whatever. It might be a very private thing between you and that spirit. I, however, happen to have a need to tell the world everything, and so I have to get the okay and get them here so they can tell their story because I want to hear it. No, I don't tell everything really. There are secrets.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you like to know? But yes, and so that leads us into so yes, this is a great book. It's and you know what? I have to confess, I haven't gotten to gods and goddesses of Wales because there's just too much activities. I've been doing a lot of moon books lately.
So Gods and Goddesses of Wales is using a similar principle to Folktales, Fairies and Spirits in that, so I've lived in Wales now for 18 years, almost 18 years. And I've been working with the stories and working with the deities here. And one of the things that annoyed me is you get a lot of books that are like Celtic gods and goddesses, and this is changing now, thankfully. Christopher Hughes is a really great person to change this. But you'd get these Celtic things, and they'd be all about the Irish deities. And I was there going, but we have these legends, we have these stories, we have these beings here who people are working with. Well, how do you find a way in? So as a storyteller, I tell these stories and I tell them in English, and I do my best to check that I'm getting the Welsh right. The pronunciation guide in the back of the book was double checked by a native Welsh speaker for me. And I'd only made one or two mistakes in how I'd written it out. So there is a pronunciation guide which helps. And
pronunciation guide. I don't know if it shows up. It doesn't.
No, not really. Oh, there you go. There you go. So I wanted to, as a way of giving back to the deities here that welcomed me when I turned up on their doorstep, as a way of giving back to them, I wanted to try and share these stories as entryways for people to begin building relationships with the gods that might be calling them. And so it's not really designed for you to go through and work through each one in turn. It's a case of you read the stories, and then the ones that call to you, those are where you start. And it's a doorway that opens up and you can meet. So within each chapter, there's the story, there's a bit of a breakdown, and then there's like talking about each of the beings within. But you also talk about like what even is a god, like what even is a fairy. So so I do invite people who want to open those doors, who are feeling a call and don't know how to just open the door. This is where to start. And this is why I begin each of my books with, please write your own notes in the margins. Please.
Because that's how you remember and use those highlighters, and that with your books. I don't know, and moon books in general, they are for me reference books. Yeah. So you don't. I've got so many views, but I don't actually finish them because you're sitting there one day and you're like, oh my goodness, I need a sun god, and then there's the books, and then you're like, okay, sun god. and throw like, a little tab on the top, and there it goes. Right.
Yeah.
So
And
so they
and
are.
so that yeah, and so like that's the key for all of these is what I want to support people in doing is in beginning and deepening the relationships with these beings so that you can develop your own relationship and working relationship with them, so that it isn't it's not a throwaway thing, it's not a transactional thing, it's here is a starting point. I in all of what I do, I want to empower people to get in touch with these beings themselves in safe ways.
And there is that fear there that we've been taught with traditional religions, that you have to do it exactly right. You have to do it, and they're judging. They're judging. I'm pretty sure my cat judges more than most of these gods, but I've seen her do it. But yeah, no, they are. They understand that you're human. I mean, most of those gods don't have everything going on in their life exactly right. So you can approach them and with respect and listening. And that's the magic of story. Okay, we wanted to talk about the magic of story. And now we have Halo, we have 4 minutes left.
We have 4 minutes. Oh dear. Okay. Well, there's my PhD. So I say I'm a philosopher. I'm a doctor in philosophy, and my PhD was in storytelling as enchantment. So it was very specifically about a specific philosopher, and da-di-da-di-da. It gets really complicated, and it's a niche thing because it's a PhD. But it was about the way in which storytelling helps us to re-enchant our worlds. And by re-enchant our worlds, I mean re-find that connection. And so we, like all of the things that I've talked about, go back to that thing of stories can be starting points, whether they're stories in our heads, the stories that we tell ourselves, stories in books, stories that we hear in the world. They're starting points for relationship and for being wholly and fully ourselves. And when we listen to a story and we enter into a story with a storyteller, or we tell a story and we enter into a story with the listener, we are stepping into this space where anything can happen, and where the world gets a little bit squishy, and where spirit can start to be heard. And we feel those changes, we feel those differences. When we're in the story, we feel the adventure that the protagonist is going on. We feel what they are feeling, because we're amazing at that. The empathetic human creatures that we are amazing at feeling what the even imaginary protagonists are doing, let alone people that have really lived it. So when we're there, we go through these experiences and we learn from them, and we are changed by them. And so when we go into stories that are talking about the beings that we are working with, when we're dipping into legend, myth, fairy tales, we encounter those spirits there, because the story itself makes the world a little bit squishy and opens us up to those experiences, and gives us the opportunity to, if we choose to, step into relationship with the magic and the beings that are there.
Because stories have everything. I think it's kind of an in-between world between imagination and what people consider reality. And we have a question. Given your philosophical training, I'm going to show it. Given your philosophical training, do you approach magical issues in classical terms such as deontology or virtue ethics?
So sometimes I will explore things in using those concepts. I don't tend to apply, that's not true. I will apply those terms to it, but when I'm writing or when I'm sharing and teaching, I will often leave that out, because actually using the specific terminology from the philosophical background, it then requires a book's worth of explanation in order to explain it. So I've found that I can, generally speaking, put all these things in plain English, which suits my brain better as well, because I remember the concepts better than I remember the terms. So yes and no is the short answer to that, because we're running out of time.
Yes and no. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you. But yeah.
So, I was gonna say because it's 2 o'clock already. Okay, I got a couple minutes. It's just going to music. So I think the important thing is, Halo, you're going to have to come back.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So we can discuss this more. And thank you. It has been, you have brought some enchantment to us all and more wonder. And yeah, I look forward to talking to you again. Okay, I'm gonna have
Thank
to
you
say
very much.
bye now.
I'd like to just say, if anyone wants to find me, you can find me at
Okay.
haloquin.net. That's HALOQUIN.net. And you are welcome if you're interested in working further on the Crimson Craft material. I do have a private group which is free for anyone to join. So come and find me and join the Crimson Coven Collective.
So if you just find her on Facebook, all the info's there. If you're watching this through SoundCloud or Spotify or any of the other platforms, it's all in the show description. But honestly, we all Google now. So just go to Facebook and put in Halo Quin and she'll have all the stuff for you right there. Is it Halo Quin
Splendid.
author?
Halo Quin author is the
Right.
public page.
Check out her storytelling on YouTube.
Yep.
And she also has a YouTube channel, so you can go there for more information about Crimson Craft and whatever. So yes, I have to say goodbye now.
Thank you so much.
We'll talk soon. Okay, stay in touch. And we're removing her into her little box. Okay, next week, our guest is Imelda Elmcrest, and she is an author, artist, and international teacher of sacred art and Old Norse traditions. She appeared in Ice Age shamanic part of the Mystic Britain series made for the Smithsonian Museum, and has a forest school in the east coast of Sweden, and will teach her first sacred art retreat in Greenland in 2004. Dare I dream? That would be wonderful. So I'm going to say goodbye. And until next week, may your coffee be hot and your story sweet. Thank you for listening, everyone.